Welcome to the Story and Critique Show. This is a weekly or a bi-weekly stream where I read stories from writers in the community. I do fantasy, thriller, horror, romance, children's, young adult, memoir, and all in between, all in the hopes to help you become a better writer, to help our writers in the community improve. Now, essentially each submission receives a live reading and a live critique. The critique is generally what I would what I would call an alpha or a beta reading. So I will definitely be able to help you with that. And once again, if you're wanting to submit now. The submission link is linked down in the YouTube description. All you got to do is fill out a couple questions like your pen name, the genre, and what your goals are. So that way I can better give you support to help you along with your journey. And now, how do we critique? So let's throw up our critique guidelines. For those of you not familiar, I like to break down critiquing into a couple of different elements. I like to look for character development, world building, dialogue, plot, or style. By breaking up what the opportunities are for the story into what works and what doesn't work, it's able to help writers with more actionable feedback that they can improve their stories right now. And of course, most importantly, if you're in the chat, drop a comment if there's something that you really, really like. If there's a part of the story that really speaks to your soul, you're like, this is fire. Drop a comment, let the writer know. I guarantee you, whether the author is watching live or on the replay, they're going to get a lot of value out of it. At the same time, if there's a part of the story where like, hey, that doesn't make sense, that could be improved, or something just feels off, also let the author know. We are going under the assumption that if we're submitting to the stream, we want our stories to be improved. All feedback is good feedback as long as it's delivered in a way that's kind and clear. So let's try to help out the writers as much as possible. I would love to hear from you. And for those of you who I'm working on, if I'm highlighting your story, if I'm highlighting bits of it as I go, no worries. That's more for my notes on my end so I can remember what to touch on when I get into it. All right, so let's queue up our first story. So without further ado, we will be queuing up and starting with Altered One, a fantasy by author Lmae. Now, Lmae, welcome back to the community, my friend. I know we did one of your chapters. I think we did some excerpts of this a long while back. So I'm really glad to see that we've gotten some improvements and we're going to see just how far along the story has come. All right, so I'm just queuing and setting this up on my end. And we should be all good to go. All right, here we go. All right, and I think I've got that here, and perfect. All right, and I think I am all ready. Okay, so let's cue this up. So for story reading number one, Altered One is a fantasy by author Lmae, and there's a couple of notes. Let's see, you rewrote most of the book. Chapter one is mostly the same, but everything has changed. Let's see, this is a short story or a novel. Let's see, what do we put here? Let's see, make sure I'm reading the right one. And so this is a novel, and currently you're doing revisions right now. Order is what makes a clean and functional society. It is all the more important when you live in a world with beings that can alter the state of matter on a whim. Ivan Inquis lives by this proudly as an inquisitor, and swears to be nothing like his traitorous weaver father. But what is the point of rules if you lack the power to enforce them? He finds this out the hard way when an old friend of his late father comes crashing into his life. Altered One by Lmae. Unwelcome Guests, Chapter 2. 1 hour in, and he still has that smug smile on his face. Ivan observed Sable from the other side of the glass. In the interrogation room, from its stark white interior to its headache-inducing lighting, lighting. Everything in that room was designed to invoke the most discomfort and distress without intruding upon basic human dignity. And yet, the weaver remained unfazed. Despite being stripped of his flashy robes for a humble, pale smock, he sat in his arm and leg restraints like a proud king. And the two dark-haired inquisitors berating him were just peasants asking him pointless questions. He simply fluttered his eyelashes and repeated, "I don't recall." Ivan grumbled and looked up at the circular analog clock hanging on the wall behind him. It was 7 a.m., and he barely got any sleep. Too busy dealing with that weaver and filing paperwork for Uncle. He turned to Iker, who was hunched over the desk, containing a control panel for the room's lighting, microphone, and speaker system. A red shine from the buttons in the panel formed a highlight on the edge of his square jaw. His chair remained untouched, as well as his coffee, which grew stale after sitting there for an hour. Iker kept silent, his focus drawn to the weaver in the other room. This is going nowhere. He pressed the on button for the mic and ordered, "Vasco, Nicola, get in here." Iker waited for two men to enter. They were both in their early 20s and possessed the standard black hair, broad shoulders, and square jaw of most inquists. Ivan's silver hair and leaner build were an exception. Vasco, however, was slightly shorter than his cousin, Nicola, and was more slovenly. Stray strands of hair fell from his wavy side part. On the other hand, Nicola was sleek, like an eel, and appeared to starch every part of his uniform, including the unseen parts. Once they arrived, Nicola locked the door behind them, while Vasco gave Iker a shrug. No luck. He is willing to fall on a sword for his master. Nicola remained in front of the door with his arms folded behind his back. It also appears that he was trained for this, which isn't surprising for weavers who did some military service. Iker grunted. His devotion to his master is admirable. If only he applied the same to the Empire. He glanced at Sable again. We are going to let him stew for 2 hours and let Sully have a go at him. Ivan will assist. Sully. The mention of his name made everything in the room, minus Iker, jump out of their skin. Ivan noticed sympathetic glances from Nicola and Vasco. A chill came over Ivan. Pardon? You will be there to take notes while your cousin makes him more compliant. The Sable fellow becomes more talkative when you are around, and he might finally let something slip. I understood. Ivan's reluctant pause before his reply was not missed, and Vasco gave him a nervous laugh. Remember, you're not the one in the chair this time. The corner of Ivan's lips twitched before he forced a smile, and then he sat down in one of the chairs in front of the control panel. It still does not stop the flashbacks from popping up. I like Sully, but he's a menace. Even during training simulations, he gets too enthralled and becomes troublesome. A tall, ghoulish-looking man displaying pasty white skin and a sleek ponytail promptly entered with an old leather bag. His dark, deep-set eyes accounted for everyone in the room before he greeted Iker with a handshake. Master Iker, you called. Yes. Ivan caught a weaver behind on his fees and accused of poisoning his apprentices. We have enough evidence to pin it on him after we search his hideout in the woods. We need you to convince him to give up his master and tell us what he did with the victim's Aether hearts. Sully studied Sable like a butcher, deciding the grade on a cut of meat. The weaver was now whistling a giddy tune, and Sully briefly hummed along with a smile. Charming-looking fellow, isn't he? It has been a while since I've seen a common-born weaver. He could be eating them. Cannibalism! Ivan clenched his jaw and his head swiveled to Sable's direction. Could he really be that mad? Isn't that a bit of a jump? Sully's eyes locked on Ivan, and he began to inch his way towards him. I should have kept quiet. After stroking his chin in thought, Sully gently placed an intrusive hand on Ivan's shoulder. Well, It is an assertion, but there was a case near the capital of a weaver, selling pills made from either hearts he harvested from his apprentices. He hailed it as a natural remedy for Blackheart and Aetherian degeneration disease. Ivan could feel bile coming up his throat. I understand those are debilitating weaver diseases, but he shook his head and refused to think any more about it. Sully chuckled and rubbed Ivan's shoulder. Despite receiving your badge, you are still a mere fledgling. I've seen worse, but that case was certainly up there. Iker hummed. It is possible. We currently don't have any evidence of that. Find the truth, like you always do. Sully's dark eyes sparkled, and he gave him a large smile that blended into his skin. I will do my best, Master Iker. His hand slipped down from Ivan's shoulder, and he gave him a tight side hug. Come on. We shouldn't keep our friend waiting. I forgot how stale the air was in here. Ivan followed Sully into the interrogation room, rolling a wooden cart painted with the same white hue was the room. Sable perked up upon seeing them. I guess he was getting bored. He greeted them with a smile, dripping with malice. Oh, so you finally brought a mind rattler to interrogate me. Sadly, this one lacks his family's abilities. Sully glanced at Ivan before addressing their prisoner with a cheerful smile. Good day to you. I have been entrusted with accompanying you today. Ivan is here to assist me. He needs the experience. As a master who had several young charges under your care, I trust you understand. Yes. Sable looked at the leather bag suspiciously. Sully dropped it on the table and pointed for Ivan to prepare the tools for his trade. Swiftly, Ivan pulled out several brown translucent glass bottles. Antiseptics, anesthetics, pain enhancers. These are downright nasty. He then placed 2 syringes, gauze, a scalpel, and a flesh knife on the metal tray, following it up with a bone saw that Sully promptly removed from his grasp. This one is my favorite to use on the living. Sully caressed the saw with his thick, gloved hand. Which one is yours? Judging by the cuts you made on your victims, my guess is the scalpel. Ivan noticed a look of mild concern, forming a crack in Sable's blasé persona. He got the syringe ready. I would comply if I were you. As if I would take advice from a neuter mutt living amongst a pack of mongrels. Sable's green eyes turned into pinpoints, and he gnashed his teeth. Heaven cursed, eitherless cattle! Do you think you have the right to look down on me just because our spineless emperor gave you a badge and a title? I can, and I surely will, Oathbreaker, Ivan answered coldly. You betrayed the empire that nurtured your talents and awarded you with honor and riches according to your title as a general weaver. And Justice Highness, you violated the trust between an apprentice and his master, which is considered a sacred bond among weavers. I did no such thing, Sable scoffed. An apprentice's duty is to his master. If my master says kill, I kill. If he tells me to kowtow and rice until my legs bleed, I gladly will. And even if he asks me to die, I will ask in what manner. I already told you, cur. I no longer serve this pathetic empire filled by insects and decadent fools. You might be fine with poisoning yourself for your master, but what about your former apprentices? From what I overheard from your conversation with that boy, he did not seem fully aware of the gravity of what you were asking him. Sable's eyes drifted past Ivan to Sully. I might have withheld some things from him, like I'm sure your master does to you. Though my time with them was brief. They died for a good cause. I don't care what you do to me. My master's given me a purpose, and it will come to fruition. Stopping me isn't going to do a thing. So I looked upon the weaver curiously. What is this purpose? If it is inevitable, it should not make a difference if you tell us. You'll see. Sable hissed through his teeth. Very well. Sully barely hid the mirth in his voice, causing Sable to grow redder from frustration. He inched closer to the weaver with the saw, and Sable's bravado further waned. All right, and I'm going to stop the reading there. Really, really great work, by the way. That was a really cool scene. And... All right, so really, really great work, Lmae. I was so happy how that came out. I feel like there were some things that worked out really, really well for it, and there's a couple of opportunities as well. I would say what the strengths, I would say the plotting is definitely a strength. I can tell the plot has been really very well thought out and strategized, even from just reading this brief excerpt. And I can tell with the bits of foreshadowing that you do in the dialogue and the action. So really, really great job on that front. World building, I think if I recall, there was a lot more world building references in the first one. There's some references in this chapter, but I don't think it either adds or detracts. I think it's just kind of in the background. No comments on world building. I would say the biggest opportunity is probably on the dialogue, I would say, and some bits on setting up. There's a couple of technical opportunities, but it's interesting because what's really working for the piece is the character development, and it's also kind of what needs a little bit of cleaning up. So let's hop into it because there are some things I absolutely loved. And by the way, that torture scene, once we got into that conversation with the prisoner Sable and the other two, Sully and Ivan, that was very, very strong. It was a very strong moment, and you did very, very well crafting that story beat. So really, really great job on that part. So let me hop into the specific moments and see what we see. All right, so let's see. So starting from the top, everything... Let's see. So everything in that room was designed to invoke the most discomfort and distress. All right, so you did a good job on setting up the scene. You did a really good job on setting up the scene. From its stark white interior to its headache-inducing lighting, everything in that room was designed to invoke the most discomfort and distress without intruding upon basic human dignity. Now, of course, my friends, there's always going to be opportunities for editing, but I think we're at a point of the story where we're not going to focus on the grammar of it all, and I'm purely focused more on the developmental side of it. Now, I think from an outside perspective, I was like, okay, this gives me a good idea. It's basically like a torture room of some type. You could cut down on the worriedness if you wanted to, but I think that works. I don't know what a weaver is, but my guess is you probably set up weavers in the first chapter as kind of, it sounds like a class, or it sounds like a class or like a job, essentially. Or maybe a type of magic user, like a wizard. Let's see. Despite being stripped of his flashy robes, he signed his arm and leg restraints. Okay, yeah. So I believe the Weaver is, I believe, was it Sully? I believe Sully was the Weaver. I don't remember the character's name because you mentioned him, and yet the Weaver remained unfazed despite being stripped of his flashy robes. And the thing is, this is a really interesting setup for this character. So I think what's really interesting is you have some really strong character beats, but I think you need to adjust some of your character setups. So we have Ivan comes into the room. So we have Ivan and Sable. Now, if I recall correctly, you set up Ivan very well in the first chapter, but I don't know who Sable is. Now, if you set up Sable in the first chapter, great, don't worry about it, but we need to know who Sable is. If I recall, I think there's 4 or 5 characters in this chapter, and a couple of the characters kind of start blending together because I'm just not sure who is who. Now, we are in chapter 2, so we don't know what you set up in chapter 1. I know since Ivan's the POV, our main character, we can assume Ivan was definitely set up. I think if I recall correctly, because this was a while back, I think Ivan confronted this guy that they have a prisoner right now. So I think the prisoner was set up, I believe. But I think just for clarity, I might mention the prisoner's name here, just to clarify. So if you have already set up the prisoner, you should mention the prisoner's name somewhere in here. If you haven't, he fought Sable in chapter 1. Okay, cool. Yeah, so he was the one. Weavers are like wizards. Cool. Weavers look like the magic use or something. Yeah. Okay, so that's what I thought. So weavers are like wizards. Oh, I like that actually. It's cool. Let's see. So yeah, and he fought Sable in chapter 1. Cool. So you have set up this character. The Weaver remained unfazed. Okay, so then, so since you have set him up, then I would just make sure to clarify if he is referenced as the Weaver throughout chapter 1, then that's fine. No changes needed. If you reference him by his name in chapter 1, then I might mention his name here. You can kind of go back and forth, but I think you just want to make this as clear as possible so the reader doesn't think that they're interrogating someone else. And then Iker was interesting. Iker's kind of like, seems like his boss. I think we needed setup for Iker, unless you set him up in the first chapter. He was hunched over a desk containing a control panel, red shine. His jar remained untouched, as well as coffee, which grew stale. His focus drawn on the Weaver. Yeah, so, and I think this is the challenge, right? So we have Iker, Iker. And then we also have Vasco and Nicola. So we have three characters. I was clear on who Ivan was because he's our MC, but I wasn't, for some reason, the other three characters, Iker, Vasco, and Nicola, kind of started blending together for me. And I don't think it's because their personalities are too similar. I think it's because they just need a clearer setup in this chapter. So I would say even if you have set them up previously in chapter 1, I think when Iker's mentioned, we know that he's the one. You do a thing with him like sitting over the lighting and the microphone and speaker system, but who is he? We know that he's basically sitting there. He's been drinking coffee. He's been doing something, but who is Iker? And I think we need like a sentence that clarifies who Iker is. Is he like the prison guard? Is he like the boss? Is he like a torture? I'm just not quite sure about that. Of course, unless you set that up, if you did set that up in chapter 1, then you would just reference. Then the reader should know what's going on. Now, this is fine when he tells these guys to get in here, but once the two men enter, and you do give us a description of them, which is great. So they're both in their early 20s and possess the standard black hair, broad shoulders, and square jaw of most Inquises. Vasco, however, was slightly shorter than his cousin, Nicola, and was more slovenly. Stray strands of hair fell from his wavy side part. Okay, so let's see. They both have black hair. Vasco. So I think what's happening is from the paragraph structure, I think what's happening is they're blending together. So the way that you've set this up, you're basically doing this as one idea of setting up the two cousins. Now, this is kind of going to depend on how important the cousins are. If they're going to be show up sporadically through the novel, I might give them a little bit more focus. But if this is just like a standalone chapter for them, then I wouldn't worry about it as much. I would give each of them their own paragraph. Because otherwise what happens is then they just kind of get combined because you introduce them as the two cousins. And especially because they're referenced here together. And then you reference them here as the two men. And they're both in their early 20s, and they both possess black hair. To me, they're just kind of one and the same. And you can get away with it if the characters really are just like small characters just to fill a role. But if you're going to be doing character development with either of them, or they're going to show up consistently, I would try to ask, how do they stand out? How do I differentiate Vasco from Nicola? Vasco is the shorter one. And I wouldn't even reference Nicola in this. I would let this one be Vasco. Vasco, however, was slightly shorter than cousin, and more slovenly. Stray strands of hair fell from his wavy side part. All right, and I might even add like an additional thing if we need some more description. On the other hand, so Vasco is short, straight strands. He's short and his hair is messy. I might just make that more obvious. Was slightly shorter and straight strands of hair fell from his wavy side part. He was a mess. There we go. Let's give it like a clearer visual on who Vasco is. And then Nicola was sleek like an eel and appeared to starch every part of his uniform, including the unseen parts. And well, how would we know the unseen parts? Which, like, that's interesting, but unless we're in Nicola's head right now, where there'd just be no way for us to know that. On the other hand, Nicola was sleek like an eel and appeared to starch every part of his uniform. Interesting. So he's like an OCD clean. I think because of his OCD nature, I think what I would do is I would give him an action. Nicola brushed, like wiped his hands off. Or like something, like do something that would be like a cleanliness thing. Nicola does an action here to represent his cleanliness. I think that's what I would do, and I think that would solidify his character. So I think that is absolutely important. Let's see, once they arrived, Nicola. And I think once these ones are a little clearer for me, I think it'd be a little easier for me to stay along with what's going on with the scene. Once they arrived, no luck. And then this falls into the same thing. So there's the two opportunities. So the characters are really interesting, but sometimes I'm not sure who's speaking. So when you set up here, you mention 3 names in this part. Once they arrive, you mention Nicola, Vasco, and Iker. So I don't actually know who's talking. I don't know if Nicola's talking, Vasco, or Iker is talking. And since I'm kind of not too certain on who is who, Nicola and Vasco were blending together, and Iker, I'm like, I think he's a prison guard. I think he's like the leader. It was difficult for me to figure out, like, okay, no luck. I get what he's saying. I get what's being said. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. They're basically talking about this interrogation. So I think when you have multiple characters in a scene, because right now we have 4 characters. We've already been introduced to Ivan, and then, well, technically we have 5 characters with the prisoner, but we have 4 prisoners right now talking. Every single time they talk, like, unless it's like 100% clear, you have to be very, very specific on character says or character does an action, right? One of the two. So that way it's just crystal clear who all is talking. That way then you just don't chance the reader getting lost. That's why it's usually harder to like set up multiple characters because you're asking the reader to keep track of more information in such a short period of time. And you have such a cool thing going on. Like, this is such a cool setup for a scene because I want to know what's going on with the bad guy. I want to see the interrogation. So you do a really good job of setting up the stakes. And this is why I think the plot is very well done, because I could just tell, yep, you're doing things with the Weavers. Nicola remained in front of the door with his arms folded behind his back, right? And I was like, okay, so this is clearly a Nicola dialogue. I think because there's a couple of them, the first couple times they speak, I think I would give them a speech tag still. So I think something like this, remaining behind, I'll just give you an example. Remaining near the door, arms crossed. Nicola said, right? So I think I would do more things like this. That way it's just crystal clear because you have to let the readers get used to the different characters. But that would just be my recommendation. Rely a little bit more heavily on speech tags when we're still getting used to characters. But the dialogue itself is good. And this is clear, right? This is clearly Iker. He glanced at Sable again. And now you said Sable, but then you mentioned him as the Weaver. So I would he glanced at the Weaver again. So I would go the Weaver since that's how you've set him up in this chapter. He glanced at the Weaver again. We are going to let him stew for 2 hours and let Sally have a go at him. Ivan will assist. Sully, and then we have a sixth character come in. So that's right. Then we have Sully come in, right? So we have Ivan, Iker, Nicola, Vasco, Sully, and then the Weaver. Yeah, so we have six characters. Chill came over Ivan, pardon, you'll be there to take notes. And this is good, right? I'm like, okay, this is actually a really good moment with Ivan and like that trepidation with Sully. That's actually really good. So, and this is interesting. So, you said Ivan's reluctant pause before his reply was not missed, which makes me think that this is Ivan talking. But then you ended off with, and Vasco gave him a nervous laugh. So I'm like, wait, so is this Vasco talking or is this Ivan talking? So I think with things like that, you just have to be crystal clear because we have so many characters in the scene. But then when we do like this interiority is really strong. I really like this. The interiority was like one of my favorite parts of this this first part of the chapter. And then you do a good job of setting up the next character, of setting up Sully, I believe, right? Tall, ghost-like a man displaying pasty white skin and a sleek ponytail promptly enter with an old leather bag. His dark, and I'm pretty sure this is Sully. I would make sure you say his name here. I would make sure you say Sully's name here, so that way it's crystal clear. Master Curry called, yep. And then this is just more plotting, Sully. Yeah, so, and this is what threw me off, right? So you mentioned Sully here, and he talks, but I wasn't crystal clear on if this was Sully or not. You set Sully up here with interiority, which was really good, but just because he's thinking about Sully doesn't mean that the next character to walk in is Sully. So I think clarifying that for the reader will help. And then this is all really good. So like the cannibalism, this creates tension and an obstacle between Ivan and Sully, which is great. Really, really great job. And then all the things they're saying are interesting. Like what's interesting is even despite all like the opportunities for like the dialogue and the setups, the plot is very intriguing, and I really want to learn more. And I want to learn more about this plot. Yeah, so I think what I would do is I would just apply the same principles and then just take that throughout the chapter. Um, And then the second part of the chapter is actually really, really strong. I think you do a better job of setting up the characters. Um, and then I have to say, I don't have as much comments for the back end of it. I feel like you do a good job of setting up the tension between Ivan, Sully, and then our the bad guy and Sable. And Sable's dialogue is really cringy, but I think it's cringy in a good way. And I started really like being able to sense the character. I started really being able to get a feel for Sable's character once he started talking. After reading this first half of the chapter, I would say that Sable was my favorite character because he felt the most believable to me because he just had this personality. I like Ivan as the POV and our main character, but I think I started liking Sable's character a little bit more. He's like that villain right now that you want to hate. Yeah, and then this back and forth scene is great. I mean, like, of course, you could like edit down on some wordiness here and there, but I think overall this is very, very strong. Yeah, and I mean that's all that I got for you, my friend. The second half of that chapter that we read, or the second half of that section, was just much stronger. So I don't have so much feedback on that part, but really, really great work, Lmae. I'm so happy to be able to go through the next section of it and see that it's continuing to progress and grow over time. So really, really great work. Awesome. And so thank you so much for that. That was a really great one. And then we're going to be reading next. We're going to be hopping into Whiteseers. So we're actually going to be hopping into one of the most recent sections of your book, A Fae's Bounty. This is a fantasy with a romance subplot by our very own author, Whiteseer. For those of you who joined us for the editing stream last week, we did an edit of the first portion of the very beginning of the chapter 1. We're now working, I think we're in the current, where the book is currently at, I think much later in the book. I think we have a fun chapter. So Whiteseer, I've got your story queued up next. We'll be hopping into your story in just a moment. And by the way, if you're just hopping into the stream, welcome. Welcome to the Story and Critique Show. This is where I read live stories and I do live critiques for writers in the community. If you're wanting feedback, submit now. Go submit, linked down in the YouTube description, and so much fun. We'll be hopping to the next one in just a moment. All right, so let me hop back into the comments, see what y'all thought. And I saw a couple of you hopping throughout. I know, I agree. There was some really good subtle intimidation in that scene. There were some really good moments of intimidation. So definitely. And then Sklo, I saw you hopped in during this. So this is definitely, like I said, this is something that we do for writers in the community. You should definitely submit your story if you're ever wanting feedback on it. This is one of our like specialty weekly streams that I do to help out writers in the community, because we know that getting feedback for your story can be really expensive. So trying to create like something free to help writers out. You know what's interesting, Whiteseer, as you said to me, Weaver sounds like magic user. I have another story that uses Weaver as a magic class. It's funny. One of my favorite games, Hollow Knight, and most recently Silksong. That's kind of like been on my mind in the background. So when I hear Weaver, I think of like the spiders and the Weavers from that game because it's very popular. I like didn't even think, or then I would think of Weaver like maybe weaving something. I wouldn't even think of Weaver as a magic user personally. But it's cool. It's a good idea for a magic class. I think it works. Mm. Okay, so yeah, it sounds like Iker was set up at the end of the last chapter, which then it sounds like you've already done the setup for them. Hmm. Yeah, and that's what was really interesting. I felt like Lmae, you did a really good job with the dialogue. I think the dialogue itself was one of your strengths. I think it was just doing the setup and doing the work outside of the dialogue, so that way we didn't get distracted from the dialogue, which is interesting. I know. Silksong crashed online stores because nobody knew how popular it was going to be. I mean, people knew how popular it would be. I guess the game companies didn't think it was going to be that popular. All right, my friend. So we're gonna hop into the next reading. I'm so excited to hop into Whiteseer's work. And by the way, if you're enjoying the stream, follow or subscribe. I'm here every day with the WriteNow community. Whether you're looking for writing sprints, a community of all different styles of writers, whether you're looking for critique shows, edit shows, we have a writing competition coming up. We do writing conferences. We do all the things. If you're looking for help with finishing your book or just staying a little bit more motivated, this is the place for you. So make sure to tap that follow or subscribe button and you'll be alerted when we go live. All right, my friends. So excellent. Let's hop into it. Let me queue up Lmae's. Not Lmae. Let me queue up Whiteseer's. All right. And I will get this all set. All right, perfect. And I am good. So let me throw this up and I think I am ready. So let's see what we got here for Whiteseer. Okay, so we are going to be reading a Phase Bounty, which is a fantasy with romance subplot by author Whiteseer. And the feedback they want general feedback on the flow of the whole fight scene and dialogue. So it looks like we're about to get a fight and an action scene right here. They're worried about their main character, Maeve, becoming a Mary Sue, which we do not want for our main character. Let's see. And then this is a first draft of a novel. So we're focusing on developmental feedback, not grammatical. And then for those of you who haven't read or listened previously, Maeve is a half-elven mercenary with a dangerous fey patron, tracks a deserter spy named Cassian, who always seems to slip away, and steal her heart in the process. But when a political coup ignites and whispers of ancient magic stir beneath the surface, Maeve is drawn into a spiraling conflict between mortals and the Fae. And it looks like this is chapter 4. Some backstory between chapters 1 and 3. We have found out that Maeve has a pact with the Fae patron. She is also waiting out the clock to meet with Cassian, who has messaged her. She has 4 weeks to kill, so she takes a bounty to hunt a half-ogre deserter. She paused, eyes narrowing. She could see faint wisps of smoke bleeding through the brush ahead. Voices followed, low, scattered. The Kemp was awake, crouching low. She stalked forward along the trail, now widening into a patch of open ground. Through the leaves, she caught sight of them. 2 men, bickering, a woman snapping orders, her voice sharp and unbothered. Maeve's fingers slid to the hilt of her sword. She edged closer. The camp sprawled in lazy disarray, an overturned cart in a muddy clearing, a cobblestone hut beside it. Rough shelters leaned against trees. At the far end stood a hulking figure near a makeshift table, an ogre-sized sword propped beside him. Gore Kragan, most likely. 2 men argued with the woman over a brace of rabbits, bickering over who had failed to clean them. Nearby, a halfling sat cleaning a worn crossbow, whistling tunelessly. She was still weighing her approach when the halfling looked up, squinting. "What you doing over there?" he called, already lifting the crossbow. Maeve froze. The others turned, reaching for weapons. So much for subtle. She stood, stepping into the open, cloak brushing aside the wet underbrush. Calm and sure, she walked into the heart of the camp. Her eyes swept the group. The 2 men wore worn Halician surcoats over chain shirts, their soldier issue longswords clanking as they moved forward. The woman, leather armored in a patchwork of hardened scraps, brandished a short sword and a cruel punch dagger, flexing her wrist with slow menace. The halfling climbed atop a rock, crossbow aimed, one eye squinted shut. The brute, Gore, hadn't moved at all, still hunched over the table, looming in silence. "You a little lost, love?" the woman asked, stepping forward with a lopsided grin. The 2 men spread out, just enough space between them for her to saunter through and stop nearly nose to nose with Maeve. Maeve tilted her head, unfazed. Big idiot, flanked by smaller idiots. No, I'd say I'm exactly where I need to be. The woman's grin widened. "I hope your sword arm can back up that mouth." She twirled her blade, the punch dagger catching light. Without looking, she gestured toward the halfling. "Snickerlock's got a beat on you, and he don't miss." Snickerlock raised the crossbow to his shoulder and sniffed loudly, a glob of mucus dragging up the back of his throat. Maeve smiled thinly. "I carry an officiated writ," she said, her voice clear. "Gore Kragan, you've been marked a deserter. You can come quietly or not." The woman snorted. "You think all 5 of us are just going to come along?" Maeve shook her head. "No, you're mistaken. I only need the half ogre. The rest of you can make your own choices." She stepped back, slowly drawing her scimitar. The blade spoke as it came free, a long, cold note that ended in a clean, metallic ting. One of the men flinched at the sound. "I wouldn't recommend getting in my way," Maeve warned. The taller of the 2 men stepped forward and tapped the woman on the shoulder. "Kyla, you hearing this? She's outnumbered, 5 to 1. This one's the clever one, Maeve said, expressionless on the surface, but already stealthily tracing sigils under her cloak, her fingers weaving through muscle memory by her side, hidden. Her tattoo sparked faintly, shadows stirring beneath the clock. But it won't help. She raised her arm fast, cold, green fire spilling down her shoulder and surging into her palm. It flared into 3 small luminous darts. With a flick, the bolt screamed toward the halfling. They hit with rapid thuds. Chest, shoulder, neck. Snickerlock yelped as the force knocked him from the rock, his crossbow bolt loosening harmlessly into the canopy. One of the men stood, gawping. Kyla and the other bandit fawned out, blades drawn. The man on Maeve's right lunged with a roar, blade arching high in a sloppy overhead strike. Maeve pivoted, scimitar flashing up to meet his. Steel rang against steel, but her angle was sharper. She stepped around his guard and forced his boot into his knee. He stumbled just enough. Maeve brought the pommel of her sword up under his chin with brutal force. His head snapped back, mouth open in a choked gasp. She didn't hesitate. With a twist, she slid her blade across his exposed throat. Blood sprayed, hot and sudden. He dropped with a gargling sound. The second man, gawping, motionless, took a step back. His blade trembled in his hand. Coward! Kyla spat, stepping over the fallen man. Turning back to Maeve, she snarled, "You'll die screaming, bitch!" Maeve angled her blade. "Get in line." Kyla rushed her, no hesitation this time. Her short sword slashed low while the punch dagger darted in high, aiming for Maeve's throat. But Maeve was faster. She dropped low, the dagger finding only the ends of Maeve's flicking hair. Kyla pressed, teeth bared, striking with tight, violent flurries. Maeve gave ground, but stayed controlled, parrying each attack. 1 step, 2 steps. Then she pivoted, catching Kyla's short sword under her guard. With a twist, she locked it, then rammed her elbow into Kyla's face. Cartilage crunched. Kyla screamed. Maeve spun, ducking beneath the retaliating punch dagger and pulling the knife free from the scabbard on her thigh. She drove it through the woman's ribs with a vicious twist. Kyla stiffened, mouth open in a silent gasp. Her short sword clattered to the ground. Maeve shoved her back. The woman staggered, fell to her knees, then pitched forward, dead. The remaining bandit, the one who'd watched it all, pale and wide-eyed, dropped his sword. It hit the ground with a hollow clatter. He turned and ran, crashing into the underbrush with no attempt to look back. Maeve let him go. She turned slowly toward the table. Gore Kragan had only turned around to witness the fight. Even for a half-ogre, he was massive, easily 8 feet tall, with a barrel chest and shoulders, wide enough to shade the table behind him. His face was craggy and tusked, with a crooked nose and eyes like chips of shale. He stood there, massive arms folded, watching her. The great sword beside him gleamed dully in the morning light. "Well," he said, voice like gravel, "you've got spine. I'll give you that." Maeve wiped her blade clean on Kyla's sleeve. "Are we doing this the hard way?" Gore's lips curled. "Ain't never been any other way for me." The giant of a man shifted slightly, cracking the bones in his neck with a lazy roll of his head. Maeve closed the distance, scimitar low, slowly stepping sideways. Gore's hand twitched. She shot just in time. With a grunt, he snatched up the ogre-sized sword in a single, fluid motion and swung it toward her in an overhead, vicious arc. No flourish, just raw, brutal power. Maeve leaned back, the blade missing her by inches. It struck the ground with a thunderous clang, kicking up dirt and shards of stone. As he pulled the sword free, she stepped forward and slammed the toe of her big foot against the flat of the blade, setting it aside. He grunted, surprised. She stepped back, raising her scimitar just as he dropped into a mid-guard, deceptively quick for a man his size. Steel met steel again. She pivoted, sliding to the side of him to avoid the full effect of his superior strength. Her blade sliced across the meat of his upper left arm, drawing a growl from him. Blood welled instantly. With a roar, he took his right hand from his sword, twisting his hips and slamming his fist into her face. She had turned, but too slow, his knuckles thinly connecting. Pain cascaded across her cheekbone. Maeve stumbled, blinking stars from her vision. She bit down hard, the metallic tang of blood filling her mouth. She spat crimson on the ground between them. "You hit like a drunk ox," she hissed. He came at her again, swinging low. She twisted aside, the air whistling with the force of his attack. Another wild swing followed. He growled in frustration. Maeve rolled away, desperately trying to shake off the punch. Using Lofan's gift had exhausted her. She saw a risky opportunity to end it. With a whispered incantation, she flicked her hand, conjuring a burst of flickering green-white light that exploded in front of his eyes. Gore bellowed and staggered back. Seeing his disorientation, she stepped behind him and dragged her scimitars across his back in a brutal arc. The blade cut through flesh and leather with a wet sound, leaving a dark gash in its wake. Snarling through the pain, Gore whipped around, blind but determined. He swung high, a two-handed cleave, meant to take her head clean off. Maeve ducked. The sword whistled over her head as she danced around him, low and close, her blade sang as it cut across his stomach, tearing through fabric, muscle, and gut. He reeled. Staggering, choking on a curse, he dropped to his knees, blood soaked through his tunic in thick rivulets. He wavered on the floor for a moment, breathing heavy. Maeve stepped forward and, without ceremony, drove the heel of her boot into his face. His head snapped back. He collapsed, out cold, sprawling the dirt among the bodies of his crew. Breathing hard, Maeve rolled her shoulders and knelt beside him, pulling the manacles from her travel sack. With a click and a twist, the iron cuffs locked around his thick wrists. He groaned faintly but didn't stir. She hovered a hand above his chest, muttering softly under her breath. A flicker of green light pulsed from her fingertips and soaked into his wounds. Not enough to fully heal, but enough to staunch the bleeding. He was worth more alive, and there was no way she could carry him back. Lucky bastard, she muttered, wiping her hand on his surcoat. Happy that the bleeding stopped, she returned to her sack and removed the second set of manacles, clicking them to his ankles to prevent him from running. The camp reeked of sweat, blood, and unwashed bodies. Maeve moved quickly through the remains. The human man had a few coppers on him, barely worth bending down for, but she found a small pouch tucked in his boot. Inside, 2 rough-cut garnets glinted in the light. She turned one over in her fingers. 10 solens. Maybe, she gasped, pocketing them. The short sword and the long swords were salvageable, so she laid them beside her travel sack. Everything else was either blood-slicked or broken. She turned her attention to the woman, Kyla. The armor was too piecemeal, but she found her dagger was well made. Maeve took it too. Something about the man in the Halician surcoat gave her pause. She leaned in, inspecting the fabric. A crudely stitched patch on the chest had covered a faded Barastian insignia. Her brow furrowed. Deserters? Or double allegiances, she whispered. On the table, scattered beneath grime and scraps of dried meat, she found a map weighed down with a bone-handled dagger. She lifted it, carefully unfolding the parchment. Red circles and crude notes marked portions along the borderlands, familiar names, known villages, incursion zones, patrol routes, some she recognized from her own work. Beneath the map, tucked under a cracked tankard, were letters, inked in a bloody, coded script she didn't recognize. Behind her, Gore stirred with a low groan. Maeve rose, brushing dirt from her knees, and turned to face him, pocketing the letters and map. She knelt, her voice low and soft, as she traced faint glowing sigils into the air. The magic shimmered briefly. Then she blew the sigils into his face like a kiss on the wind. There we go, she said, smiling as his glazed eyes met hers. You're going to be very agreeable from now on. His brows twitched. She patted his cheeks gently. Let's get you home, big man. All right, and end reading. Wow, so really, really great work, Whiteseer. Really, really great work. I feel like we got quite we got quite a lot of action sequences. I was really happy with how many different action beats you were balancing. We have part 1 of the fight, we have the crony standoff, and then we have part 2 of the fight. I felt like I was engrossed in the action sequence the entire time. I think you did a really good job with the dialogue. I felt like I had a clear idea of who all the characters were. Yeah, I feel like I was clear on who each of the characters were. We had Maeve versus, I think there was the 4 of them. I think it was the 4 henchmen. We had the halfling, Kyla, and then the 2 nameless men. So we had the 4 of them versus her. And then, of course, the leader, the target. So I think you did a really good job of setting up each of the characters. I asked myself, what is the biggest opportunity? And I think there's definitely a lot. I think there's some cleaning up that can definitely be done. I think the fight with Core the second half of the fight was super clear because it's the two of them and they're just going back and forth. I think the first half, I know I have a general sense of what's going on, but there's just a couple opportunities where you really want to clean up the style of it, so that way the action feels a little bit more impactful. And I think this is more an opportunity in the structure and style of it than anything else, to better support the story that you're telling in the action. So you asked about, let's see, you had asked about general feedback on the flow. Yeah, so Maeve definitely doesn't feel like Mary Sue. I think I think Maeve's dialogue is definitely very like, she does like this whole clever thing. It almost borderlines on at some moments like it's like she's being a little extra dramatic. Um, I would recommend you get feedback from readers. I like it personally. Some readers that might feel like it's a little bit more like flary. Like it's almost like it's like those movie scene moments, right? Where someone says something and it's like very dramatic. But I'm laughing the entire time. And for me, I was actually very entertained. So, but I would definitely make sure you get feedback from readers and see how do they feel about the dialogue. I liked it. But it could be a subjective. But I definitely did not think that anybody was a Mary Sue. So you did a really great job on that part for sure. Let's see. And then I think I had a question around the plot. So let's get into it. Yeah, so you did ask a really great question. I think we have two plot-based questions, Whiteseer. So I think the two opportunities when I look at the plot question number one, how come Gore, the target, how come he just sits in the back and does nothing while all his cronies are getting killed off? I almost feel like you might want to give Gore a little bit more setup and have him be like, finish her, do that type of thing, because otherwise it's like, okay, so he's just there. Why doesn't he do anything? Why does he like wait for her to kill everybody and then come to her, and then come to him? So I might recommend that. I mean, it could be because he's probably egotistical. He thinks that she's nothing, that type of deal. But I think I would still call that out. Why doesn't he involved in the first half of the fight? So I would just call that out very briefly before the fight begins. So that's plot point number one I would address. Plot point number two, stakes. It I think it feels like there's a decentish enough amount of peril between as they go back and forth. The question I ask myself is, does it feel like Maeve is punished enough? It doesn't really feel like Maeve loses anything from either of these fights. And this is what, chapter 4, I think you said. So I think you really want to ask yourself, what are Maeve's consequences of taking on doing a 4v, a 1v4, or a 1v ogre in a sense. And it doesn't feel like Maeve deals with any real consequences. For a moment, I thought she was going to get hurt when dealing with the half ogre. And then she also uses magic. And I'm not sure what the consequence is to her using the magic. She's very smart when she does it under a cloak. In the beginning, I'm like, oh, that's cool. But I thought that she was going to be punished for it when she tries to attempt it again when going against Gore. And I think that she has to be punished, right? Otherwise, then the reader's gonna be like, okay, well, then she can just use her magic, and then there's no consequence, right? What is the consequence for her using the runes and the magic? You touch upon it. You touch upon that she's pushing herself, but you don't do something that pushes her. So that would be my other second plot adjustment recommendation. And I think this is good. I think the setup for the scene is fine. And I think we can clearly get enough here. I think because we're art giving this, I might recommend adding maybe another sensory smell to better get us into the scene. Like, what is like the smell, or what does she hear? Granted, no, you do say that they're bickering. Um, Yeah, because especially because she's tracking them. I might touch on smell or a taste. Like, is she like picking like tasting things like a trail or something like that? I don't know, like trackers do. So just a recommendation for scene setup. But when she gets here, you lay out a description of the camp, which is good. So we have the two men and the woman, and then the halfling. Cool. Originally, I was like, was there anybody else with Maeve, or was she by herself? Okay, cool. But she was obviously by herself at the beginning. So, this is good. It might be important to recognize why she doesn't think she's going to get caught. So you do mention that she's crawling closer. Is she like behind a rock and she's trying to like lean in and then the halfling sees her, or do halflings have better eyesight? Um, but that's just random thought that comes to mind. Or I mean, I would feel like she probably gets caught because something probably does have a better like smell or eyesight or something like that. Maybe. May froze, cursing her forgetfulness over halflings hearing. I don't know, something like that. She stood stepping in the open, coming sure it was good. And then you set up each of our characters. So the two men were worn Halishant, surcoats. What I would do is and I know you set up the woman as Kyla. And now, like, okay, all right. So I think you could set this up a little cleaner. So you have the men, you have the woman, and then you have the halfling, which you've already started to set up, and then you have Gore. So, where's the word? Okay, so you're basically setting up all of these characters. I think because Gore's not part of the fight, I think having him there is fine. I think you might just want to mention why he's not going to be involved. Um, I think I would set, and I see why you did this because this is what raises the stakes. I think I would mention the woman last of these setups, because I think you want to make it clear that the woman is Kyla. The two men are just nameless dudes, so that's not even that important. The two men, that's fine. The halfling, you set up the halfling already, but now he's basically standing on the rock. I would have Maeve respond with a slight action, and then we set up the woman. And I know you mentioned Gore as well. Actually, maybe not even mention Gore in this bit. I would say probably finish Gore in the beginning, deal with her, have him like deal with her, or even mention he like waves a hand and like ignores them as he goes back to drinking. Let's see. This is good. Once we get into like this characterization, this is really good. And then your dialogue is always really fun. I like your dialogue a lot. I really liked your dialogue. She twirled her blade, the punch dagger catching light. I don't know what a punch dagger is. What is a punch dagger? Interesting. I think that might actually be a way to set it up. Maeve tries to move for her. Maeve tries to move, but Snickerlock shoots an arrow and it like stops her. It like flies right by her. That could be a good way to set up. But Maeve like consents, it's not going to hit her. I don't know. That could be a good way to set up initial stakes. Okay, and I think this is the moment where the half ogre should ignore them. Be like, deal with the trash, or go clean up the elf, something like that. I think that should be when like Cora just mentions like brushing, like deal with her, Kyla, or something to that effect. And I think once we get into the action, I think you want to shorten your paragraphs as much as possible. This is good. This is good. I think if you can shorten these moments, it will help a lot because you want to get into the action, which means you want your paragraphs structure and your sentence structure to be short and impactful as possible. Especially so we can kind of get into this action because you could tell like essentially what she's doing is she's talking while she's doing things under the cloak. You could say that in a sentence. And her tattoos spark faintly. Um, cool. This is cool. This is where I feel like the paddle really starts. That's good. When the men stood gupping. Yeah, the two men don't really feel like they have any skill. The two men feel like the two men feel like the easy like henchmen. They're like the two henchmen you just push out into the beginning. I almost feel like the two men should try to work together for them to feel a little bit more formidable. Um, Once we get to the Kyla bit is really good. His short sword slash low, well, she punched. The punch dagger darted in high. That was good. This is such a great moment, right? And I think this is why I want you to, where in moments where you can, I want you to shorten your sentence structure as much as possible because like this is so impactful. And I think I want slightly shorter paragraphs if you can shorten down where possible. Because you want the reader to spend less time like, look at this one right here. This is a slight run on, but Maeve spun, ducking beneath the retaliating punch dagger, and pulling the knife free from the scabbard on her thigh, she drove it through the woman's ribs with a vicious twist. So a little bit of a mouthful. Um, and I think if you can either cut the sentences, separate them, I think it will just make it so the actions don't potentially get lost. What I took away from this in a live reading was that she spun and stabbed her in the stomach or somewhere. Yeah, she spun and stabbed her in the stomach. And like, this is good. Maeve shoved her back. The woman staggered, fell at her knees, then pitched forward, dead. Clear. Perfect. And this was good. He is like, then like, yeah, he basically turns white and runs. This is good. And then we get to the Gore Kragan fight. And I think the Gore Kragan fight was definitely a little smoother because it's kind of like she's like facing off against like the half ogre. I think once again with the plot, it just needs more stakes for her or more punishment. Yeah, I mean, you do a good job with this. Like even with the ogre fight, it's the beats are the paragraphs are a little shorter. Maeve leaned back, the blade missing her by inches. It struck the ground with a thunderous clang, kicking up dirt and shards of stone. So like that's stronger. Yeah. Yeah, and I think Whiteseer, that's really all the feedback that I have for you, my friend. Like I said, I think the back end of the fight is really interesting. Um, yeah, and I think it's really more the first half of the fight that needs a little bit more cleaning up. And even all you do at the end of the chapter is really just like you're doing foreshadowing and setup for the next part of the plot. So yeah, so I think that's all the feedback that I have for you. But definitely a really really great work. I could tell this chapter in the story is coming along really really well, and I'm definitely intrigued. I really want to know what happens to me. I want to know if she's going to catch the one dude. I want to know what's going to happen with Cassian. So really, really great work, my friend. I think with writing action sequences is always interesting, right? I myself having just done a huge action sequence in my book. And I think it's always a learning with a style instructor and trying to figure out like what makes sense, what's too long, what's not long enough, so that the reader stays engaged. So let's get you home, big man. That was a great line. That was definitely a great line. So yeah, so Whiteseer, thank you so much for submitting that, my friend. We'll be hopping into the next story. Next up is going to be Sushi Week so this is an action by author Capybara. So Capybara, Cappy, we're going to be doing your story next. This is Sushi Week. This is an action piece. And I think this is a bit more of a synopsis. But we'll see. We'll see what we see. So I'll be hopping into your story next, Cap. All right. Woo. Man, that was good. Feeling pretty good about that one. What do you guys think? We got two really great fantasy stories so far. I'm loving the fantasy. I feel like it just makes me want to go work on Scarecrow. Does listening, I would love to hear, does listening to others' stories make you want to write more? Or does it make you want to write less and go read more? I would love to hear. Drop a comment. Let's see what I got in the comments. Yeah, it sounded like Lmae liked the dialogue as well, actually. Yeah, and Mass, it sounds like you were agreeing with the peril and the stakes. FY, she gets destroyed in chapter 16. Okay, so I mean, I see why you're not really giving her too much stakes, um, because she's going to get like ultimately annihilated. So then that means that whatever she does deal with, she has to deal with more of a minor setback right now. Then something that she can easily be that's really not going to affect her too much, especially because she's then going to get severely punished for basically pushing herself. Nice. My bad. So it kind of makes you want to do both. That's really cool. I was like, I feel like for me, whenever I read these stories, it makes me want to just go and write. I just want to go work on Scarecrow. Like I need to do both. I need to read and write more. You and me both, my friends. I think that's something that we all get stuck into, right? Like I feel like I should be doing this, but then we get busy. And I feel like for me, my struggle is trying to find the time to read. I write consistently, as we all know with the streams, but I'm trying to find that balance for getting in reading time outside of like what we do on the live streams with the critique show and all the others is difficult for me. I think that's something I still haven't been able to figure out of how do I find balance with personal reading. So that's definitely an opportunity for me, something I would like to improve at some point. All right. And Yeah, right. So I totally feel you when you like just wrap up a difficult chapter and you're like, all right, time to take a breather for a moment before I re-embark on the next difficult part of this journey. Oof. All right, so let's hop into the next part. And by the way, if you're, let's see, so if you're not familiar already, we have officially launched the submission period for our next writing competition, the second annual Freaky Friday competition. I hope everyone will be involved. We're going to be having such a great time with all the crazy writing stuff that's going on. In a perfect world, I had all the pictures ready. So let's see, let me pull this up. So the next writing competition, Freaky Friday, is going to be so fire. I'm hoping everyone will want to be involved. Here we go, throw this up here. Awesome. So Freaky Friday is our next writing competition. Whether you're wanting to embark on something spooky, something creepy, or something in between, this is going to be such a great experience. For those of you who are familiar with our previous writing competitions, here's how it works. Essentially, we're going to be doing the live reading, so we'll be keeping that the same. And the way it's going to be judged, we're going to focus less on a single winner for the competition and more on the top 12 winners that are going to make it into the anthology, which I'll be announcing after the competition ends when the anthology is published. So we're going to be accepting as many, all of the submissions into the live stream, into the reading itself, and then we'll be narrowing down from there. All the stories are going to be judged on readability and genre element. So let's see, hopefully you have some time. So we'll be having a developmental feedback day in a couple weeks. The submission deadline is Sunday, October 12th. And then Freaky Friday and Spooky Saturday is near the end of October. So you got time. And then our spooky genre elements. You're going to have your chance to try out one of these genres, whether you want to go supernatural, thriller, horror, or dark fantasy. You can pick one of these genres to write in. Or let's say you want to take on the Advanced Special Challenge Prize. You can try to write a story that combines all three genres. This is like the advanced option for the writers that want to challenge themselves, or you can pick one of these three genres to test your skills in as a writer to see if you're able to make it into the anthology. So this is going to be such a fun experience. For those of you who want to know more or you want to be involved, start working on it now. I know we have a number of writers in the community who are super excited about it. And I will drop it in the chat for anyone who wants to know more. Or if you're on YouTube, it's linked down in the YouTube description down below. All right, so bomb. Wanted to make sure that I got Freaky Friday because that is going to be fire. All right, so let's see. With Freaky Friday, let's move right along. We're going to be moving into Sushi Week. Okay, and let's see what we see here. So I think we're going in a little bit of a different genre this time, and it looks like this is a little bit more of a setup. All right, so we're going to see what we see here, and let me pull up what we got. So for Sushi Week. All right, so this is Sushi Week. This is an action by author Capybara. And let's see, so this is the treatment of a short movie that they're working on, and they'd greatly appreciate any suggestions. Let's see, yep, this is for a script for a film or television. They're still kind of in the brainstorming stage of it, so they're just kind of looking for feedback and ideas. And then, let's see, when the sushi runs out at a father-son golf day, one dad will fight anyone who stands between his boy and the last bite. Without further ado, Sushi Week. The characters. Thiago the son. Thiago is a young preteen between 10 and 13 years old. He dresses sloppily and wears video game t-shirts. He is Kato's son. Thiago spends the whole day on the internet and rarely goes out, except when his father takes him to do activity. He enjoys spending time with his dad, but has little patience and gets discouraged quickly when he loses at something. He gets embarrassed by his father's explosive behavior. Thiago has never played golf before, and this is the first time visiting a golf course. Cato, the father. Cato, Thiago's 40-year-old father. He's extremely competitive and wears a sports team jersey. In his belongings, he has a wristwatch that he checks constantly. A hard worker, Cato spends most of his time at his job. When he's not working, he likes taking his son to watch their favorite team's games and spend time with them. Cato often picks fights with rival fans, all-out brawls. He takes great satisfaction beating others up, especially if the fight is tough. Cato is great at golf and good friends with the owner, Gutao. Gutao. He's the owner of the course. So Gutao is a friendly man between 40 and 50 years old, owner of the golf course. He wears fake gold rings, sunglasses, and an unbuttoned white polo shirt. His face constantly flashes a sly yellow smile. He compliments every visitor regardless of their skill and calls everyone Tiger Woods to hide the fact that he hardly ever remembers names. That's kind of funny, actually. He organized the Sushi Week event at the golf course to attract more customers. Gu Tao doesn't know the difference between Korean and Japanese and has never played golf in his life. Enzo is the great rival. So Enzo is a man of Japanese descent in his 30s. He dresses neatly and moves with deliberate elegance. His face is expressionless. Enzo wears golf gloves and shows up at the golf course every day of the week to play. He never misses a beat. He comes from a long lineage of great golf players and takes the game very seriously. He is intelligent, committed, and honorable. He hates rule breaking and drinks copious amounts of energy drinks. So he's always hopped up on energy. Okay, so let's see. So our synopsis. All right, yeah. So those were the characters, and then let's see what we got for the story. So amid the lush green lawns of a golf course, Thiago, a young preteen, adjusts his stance to hit a golf ball. Other golfers are playing across the field. Cato instructs Thiago on how to position himself to strike the ball. Thiago aims at a bucket positioned at the far end of the course. The bucket sits in the middle of a table filled with Japanese food. He swings, but misses the table entirely. Enzo takes his own shot from a far more difficult distance, and his ball lands perfectly in the same bucket. Cato quietly curses Enzo. Thiago gets gloomy from his bad shot, but Cato encourages him. Gutao approaches Thiago and Cato, complimenting Thiago's golf technique. He calls Thiago the next Tiger Woods, but jokes that Enzo is the samurai Tiger Woods. The Tiger Woods thing is funny. And that Enzo's family has won multiple golf championships over the last 5 centuries. Cato changes the subject to the Japanese food spread across tables on the field, and Gutao explains that the food is part of an event he planned for the current week. The event, called Sushi Week, was created by Gutao to draw more people to golf that week. Visitors can eat as much as they want, and he restocks every day. Thiago asks Cato if he can try some of the Japanese food, and Cato heads to a nearby table. The table is already completely empty. Cato is surprised at how quickly the food is gone. Gutao further mentions that the food tends to run out fast. Cato spots a group of 3 golfers heading toward the next food table. He asks Thiago for his golf club. Confused, Thiago hands it over. One of the visiting golfers reaches one of the food tables first and tries to grab a gyoza. Cato launches a golf ball at the golfer's hand, stopping him from eating it. The 3 golfers glare at Cato and he glares back. The scene turns into grainy black and white. The golfers ready their clubs in battle stance. Cato faces the group in a tokatsu-style samurai fight, like Power Rangers. The golf club essentially acts like a sword in combat. Cato defeats 2 golfers with a superior adapt strength. The last golfer is impaled by Cato's club and collapses unconscious onto the Japanese food table, ruining the dishes. Thiago shouts that he's not that hungry for sushi anymore, clearly embarrassed by his father's behavior. Gutao watches the next fight to Thiago, smiling broadly. Cato stomps the grass in frustration. He spots another food table where a group of 4 golfers is already brawling among themselves. Cato shouts his arrival and charges toward the table. The four golfers stop fighting each other and start launching golf balls at him. Kato dodges the projectile balls and closes in. They brawl brutally, rolling on the grass. The golfers quickly stuff their mouths with sushi whenever they can catch their breath. Thiago watches tensely, holding an empty Coke can. Gutao offers and opens a fresh can for him. Thiago drinks more cold soda. The table Kato is fighting for runs out of food, as two golfers devour the last bites. Kato defeats the four golfers, then steps on their bellies, demanding they spit the sushi out. The golfers swallow hard. Kato looks for another table. Only the table from earlier, where Thiago tried to hit the bucket and missed, still has food. It holds a single, untouched sushi package. Kato runs towards the last table. Standing in his way is Enzo, waiting patiently while chewing. Kato and Enzo speak in Japanese. Enzo fluently, Kato uttering random nonsensical Japanese-sounding words. They enter a slow strategic final duel. The wind over the golf course intensifies, roaring in their ears. Kato uses brute force, but Enzo deflects and repels his attacks. Enzo is far more skilled. He launches several golf balls at Kato, all of them hitting. Enzo slashes Kato's shirt with his club. Kato, panting and staggering, fully opens his stance, chest exposed. Enzo attacks and Kato counters. Both land a clean strike at the same time. They stand still for a few seconds. Enzo collapses unconscious and Kato falls to his knees. The film returns to full color. Kato takes the last sushi package and brings it to Thiago, limping. Thiago, full from all the coke, asks if they can take it for the road, insisting he can't eat now. Kato agrees and says goodbye to Gutao. Thiago and Kato get into their car outside the golf course. Thiago holds the sushi in his hands. A golfer armed with a club prepares to hit a ball at their car, but Enzo attacks the golfer from behind, taking him down to save them. Enzo nods and stares at the car as it drives away. The end. All right, really, really great work on that. What a crazy, All right, awesome. So what an interesting setup for a story there. I was like, I'm gonna be honest, I was not expecting that. So like we started off with this we started off with this golf course, and then it transitions into this whole like golf club samurai battle for golf and sushi. And then it leads into the final showdown with Kato and what was the other character's name? Kato and Enzo, I think. No, Kato and Thiago. So I have to remember each of the characters. No, Kato's the father, and then Enzo. So Kato and Enzo is where it ends up as. And there's a lot of really interesting things going on with it. And I could definitely tell that there's some really fun moments. So I think the story can actually definitely work. I think the biggest opportunity right now is trying to establish and figure out what type of world we're in. So I think when we first set up, I think we kind of start getting two separate. I almost felt like the first half of it was one story and the second half was another type of story. And when I say story, it's more the world building aspect of it. So like I felt like the first the setup for it is like, all right, father son golf course. It's like a golf outing. Father's like showing the son how to be a better golfer, and then we get this very early twist where suddenly they're taking out their clubs and like beating on each other or like fighting each other like katana, like a sword fight, which is really interesting. It definitely gave me like an anime. It definitely gave me like an anime vibe. I like totally was getting like anime vibes from it the entire time. Once we get to that part of the story, but I ask myself, but pull back, I'm like, okay, so why are they beating on each other with golf clubs, or is that just in his mind? And I think that's what I wasn't sure about because it cuts to black and white, which leads me to believe like, okay, so was this like all in his mind? But then you spend so much time, they're basically fighting for the sushi. So I think I was trying to understand what was going on with the world and the intent. And this is the thing. I actually think it is really cool. I think it is a really cool setup and a really cool idea. But I think that the thing that you have to keep in mind is setting it up from the very beginning, right? And I think this is what we need to know as the reader and as the viewer. Are we in a normal world where father son, they're all going to a golf course and they're all fighting for sushi, and it's kind of just more exaggerated in their heads? Or are they in like some type of like secret golf course where they're like all samurai and they like use like their golf clubs to like as like a sense of honor, like it's like an elite society. um and I think defining what the world is going to be important. I think you could go in either direction, and I think both directions could be fun, but they're both two equally different types of worlds. um so it's really interesting. I think the Yeah, so I think for me, I'm just trying to understand what type of world I was in. I think a lot of the elements, like the father-son relationship, was great. I think the Enzo, not was that the best friend, the club owner, not Enzo. I think Gutao was actually perfect. I think of all the characters, Gutao was like perfectly designed. His Tiger Woods stuff was funny. I totally, I totally see how he was doing and kind of like involved throughout. Let's see. And let's see. I saw Cap. I saw you hop in there. You're like, oh, hey, just got here in time. Sushi Week is. Yeah. You said it's like more of like an early concept. Oh, no, that's totally fine. We do all styles of storytelling in here, Cap. You're fine. We don't get the style as often, but we definitely still get it because it's all storytelling at heart. And so you said, so the world is just the normal world, but with a wacky twist. Imagine it as an 8 minute idea. Okay, so this is like an 8 minute. Okay, so I mean, 8 minutes is different than like a full 90 minute. Okay, I see what you're doing then. So if this is like an 8 minute short, the main inspiration was taken from old samurai movies like Harikiri with a heavy splash of Power Rangers and Tokusatsu. Gotcha. Okay, so as an 8 minute short, that's completely different. You don't have time to world build. The With 8 minutes, the point is, it's basically the battle over the sushi. Which that in itself is fine. So, which means really the normal golf setup with the father and the son, that's only like less than a minute. That's like 1 minute of setup. The majority of it is really the fight for the sushi. And that is the world. So the world is that golfers will do anything for sushi. I think for it to work, I think you have to clarify the importance of sushi and why they want sushi. Like it feels like Utao had to have like gotten like a whole round of sushi. Like it has to be like a specialty type of sushi that was exported from an exquisite part of the world. Um, and there's only a select number. So I think you have to make it clear early on, why is this sushi so important and why are people fighting for it. So I think if you set up that motivation early on, I think that's very important. And then them all fighting for the pieces of sushi is funny. I think you set up all the characters really, really great. In the first beat of it, all the character setup is great. Yeah, and I mean that makes sense now. It's like kind of getting that vibe. I think that makes sense now as an 8 minute short. This is definitely not. This is in a world where like the golfing elite will use their golf clubs as weapons, and I think that's actually that's interesting. Hmm. Yeah, you can tell. I think I could definitely tell that Kato is definitely aggressive. He's trying to prove to his son, and I think his character arc is actually very well done. And once again, like I think each of the characters are actually well thought out. I like the son, I like Kato, I like Gutao, and I like Enzo. I think your character development is actually very strong. I think the clarity is all in the world building part of it, and you're having to make sure that the world building is clear, and then you're wanting to make sure that the stakes are clear, so that way people follow along with the plot clearly enough. And it's a very simple thing. It's like it's not a lot. You just have to make sure that the reader is like, okay, well, why do they want the sushi so badly? Why are they fighting each other with golf clubs? And you can do the whole stylistic thing, and it's super cool. And people won't be expecting it, especially because you do that twist so early on. So I definitely think it's great. And then I mean I like the boss battle at the end with Enzo and Kato. That was a fun little boss battle. I almost feel like that you should start off the short with some type of comment about sushi. Like Kato should be making a comment like, "Life is like a box of sushi," something like that. Life is sushi, and I feel like you should start with some piece of like dialogue or some comment that is thematically tied around the idea of how important sushi is to a golfer, uh, to uh, to being an incredible golfer in this world. Maybe sushi is what powers them up. That's funny. That's super funny. Yeah, yeah. I think that it's interesting. There's so many directions that you could take. You could take this little story in. I know, right? I know. I totally started thinking Forrest Gump. You never know what you're gonna get. Life is like a box of sushi. You never know what you're gonna get. Oh man. Yeah, but I think this is definitely a fun little short. I think this is a fun little treatment though, for sure. Um, Yeah, this is cool. I think that's kind of all the ideas I got for you. But I think what I would recommend is, oh, actually, I'm curious if the goal is for you to pitch this to somebody, like you're going to pitch this to like a short studio that could bring this to life, or if this is something that you would try to create yourself because it's really interesting, and it would probably be very cheap to produce as well, which is important. An 8-minute short that is cheap to produce when really what's the biggest thing is the actors, sushi, and golf clubs, and then a golf course. So this would be a very easy thing to film. Yeah, very 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 easy thing to film. Um, Yeah, but yeah, Cap, I'm curious. I'm curious what you would be. I'm curious what your goal is and where you would want to send this. Like, what's the goal? Is your goal to like pitch it to somebody, or is your goal to make it yourself? I would love to hear because I definitely I think this could be very easily filmed and put together. So I worked in Hollywood for many years, so I was definitely familiar with the production process and what that looks like for writers, or what that looks like for screenwriters. Whiteseer, I like that. Life is like a box of sushi, raw, desirable, and in the case of golf course sushi, worth fighting for. Ah, that's funny. Oh man, well thanks so much for that, Cap. I really appreciated it. I like that we got the change. Um, awesome. So thank you so much for submitting that, Cap. That was a nice little change of pace with a different style of storytelling. With where we're at, I normally try to do like at least like a minimum of 4, but like my voice is kind of hurting today. I think I'm gonna have to call it a little early, my friends. Um, Probably just have too much on my mind to do. So I'm going to call it for the stream. Um, and we'll be back with another story and critique show again soon. I'll be back with the next one October 4th. But I feel pretty good because we got 2 story and critique shows this month, and we got the editing stream. So I'm actually pretty happy that we got 3 of 4. I think in a perfect world, when I can get my I think in a perfect world, if I can get my consistency, I think it would be cool to be able to alternate different types of streams on a Saturdays that are like as popular as like story and critique show or editing stream. So I think those are fun ones. We did a couple of them last year. It just takes a little bit more of prep work and setup, and then especially making sure that people like submit to be able to have material for the streams for what we do. But I know like for those of you, if you want to go check out stuff on the YouTube channel, we did like we did a blurb stream last year. We did a cover design stream earlier. That was last month. We did a pitch wars. We did a first page, and we did a couple of others. So hopefully more to come. Awesome. But that's what I got for you, my friends. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'll be back tomorrow with another daily writing sprint stream. Same time, same place, 1 Pacific, 4 Eastern, and we're going to get some writing done tomorrow. I need to finish this chapter with Scarecrow. I'm going to finish it tomorrow. It's the last thing I do. So that's what I'm going to be doing tomorrow. And most importantly, if you enjoyed the stream, tap the like button on your way out. Help us show the algorithm that writing streams are cool. All right, my friends, Whiteseer, Cap, my bad, and everybody else. Thank you so much for joining. It's been a great, great stream, and I really appreciate everyone's feedback and you being involved. But unfortunately, that brings us to the end of the stream. Don't forget, words are wind, but stories are forever. I'm Kauffman, and I'll catch you on the morrow. Stay creative, writers. Stories are forever. I'm Kauffman, and I'll catch you on the morrow. Stay creative, writers. It's time to write
now.
Sorry.
Right now, not right now, but right now. Read now, right now. Is that right?
Words are wind, but stories are forever.